Welcome to Flipping Tables, where we bring all of our religious thinking to Jesus, who flips the table for his upside-down kingdom. I'm Julie Sexton, and I'll be your host. Welcome to episode 33. Whenever and wherever you're listening to and from, thank you for making us a part of your day. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the way of the cross. Our Bible text is going to be Mark 8, 34 through 38. It's just 4 verses, but these 4 verses pack a punch. What Jesus says here was more than a little shocking to the disciples and the crowds. I believe these verses are still a little shocking to us, or at the very least, when we read them, we feel the weight of what Jesus is saying. This is the Flipping Tables podcast, and we try to be direct and gracious, and I hope that through our conversation that we can give you some things to think about, and that you'll take those thoughts to the table flipper and have your own conversation with him, because he's the one that we're following. I am Julie Sexton, and I am joined by one of my co-hosts, Kimberly Daniels. Hi, Kimberly.
Hi, Julie.
Welcome to the table. We are missing Twyla Brown tonight. She's not able to be with us. She needed to spend some time with her family, nurturing them. She had mentioned on a previous episode that her husband, Stefan, has been recovering from a knee replacement, and she thought everything was going great, and it is going great, but we think she needs a little time at home. Mm-hmm. So, okay. I just have to address an elephant in the room with Kimberly, because her sweet, I need to know that you are monitoring the breakfast that your family is consuming, because I feel like they got something by you.
Okay, what's the thing by me?
Andrew sent me a little video of him and Luke and little innocent Clark all chomping down on Captain Crunch. Like, they showed the box in the video. Like, this was real Captain Crunch. This wasn't like some healthy knockoff Captain Crunch. This was Captain
like hidden
Crunch.
Hidden veggies crunch.
Yeah, there was no hidden veggies in this crunch. So how did they get this through?
You know what I think when you say that? I'm like, oh, Andrew fed him breakfast. It's one less thing I have to do.
That is spoken like a true mom in the thick of it.
Yes.
Somebody fed these kids, and I didn't have to do it. There was no...
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of a hypocrite when it comes... I'm thinking of my coworker Beth, because we would talk about this all the time. How she would make fun of me and say like, "Oh, did you bring your goji berries to eat to work?" And then I talk about how my kids would have like a cup of mac and cheese for dinner.
A cup of mac and cheese.
Yeah. Hey, they're self-sufficient. They can put the water in, put it in the microwave, and yeah, I like to eat what I like to eat, and then I'm just trying to make it with everybody else. So it's true, they eat Captain Crunch.
I was always a cereal person. Like, we grew up eating cereal. I had an amazing cook for a mom, and her homemade breakfast and stuff were amazing. But I did love cereal, and we always had cereal in our house when our kids were here. We're in the season of empty nesting, and Paul hates the fact that we have no cereal ever in our house. Yeah.
And that's Andrew's weakness, is cereal. So we probably won't have it one day either. Otherwise, he'll eat it all by himself.
Well, we don't have any. He likes it with like regular cow's milk.
Yeah.
And so we don't buy very much of that.
So, where I'm getting 3 gallons a week.
Yeah, those days are gone for me. I don't have to get... I mean, I remember that, buying like 3 gallons of milk, because...
Like, it's legit 3 gallons a week.
They drank so much milk and ate cereal like it was going out of style.
Yeah, I grew up eating cereal for breakfast every morning, too. We would buy, like, the bargain big bags, you know. We didn't have the name brand Captain Crunch. Oh. My kids are so spoiled. We had, like, I don't know, Skipper munch or something, whatever I don't know what it's called, whatever the off-brand is,
I do remember trying to get some of the knockoff, like Lucky Charms or something in a bag. That went over like a lead balloon here.
Yeah. So
we were big box,
Yeah.
It's a whole different grocery experience now.
I'm sure. Yes.
And when they come over, they would want, they go into the pantry and there's no cereal for them to grab for a snack. There's no, we don't have a lot of like sweets, just like, and the snacky kind of stuff that you always keep when you have teenagers in the house or little kids. And they ware like, what do you guys eat? And we're
right.
like,
how are you surviving?
We eat actual real food now. We don't have as much.
Things that you don't have to open a package to eat.
Like, we're in different seasons of life. You're in your early 20s. You can still eat like that. We're closing in on 50 over here. And so we're going to need to watch like our fiber intake and things. It's not like that though.
That's hilarious.
Okay. So the other thing that you've been doing that I've been super jealous about, because apparently I need to get Peacock. You've been geeking out.
I have. And yeah, so we've been watching the World Championships for track and field.
Oh, so jealous.
And what's great about Peacock is that they have like highlights of the best races. So normally we put Clark to bed, or I put Clark to bed, and then the big boys, Andrew and I, will sit down and we'll watch like a 20-minute episode of something before they go to bed. That's like our big kid family time. Well, we've been watching track and field highlights, and then the U.S. Gymnastics Championship has simultaneously been going on. And so we've been either watching one or the other. And I mean, nothing makes me happier. I was looking on my memories, and I have videos of me of like watching the Olympics when the big boys were little, and them going like USA, USA. And I had Clark do it the other day, and it was just like, you guys, I have to train you to love Americans. I love when Americans go play sports in like international competition. Yes. And I love when they do well and get to wear the flag over their shoulders. And I, put all my hopes and dreams on my kids, and I'm like, I didn't make it, but there's still hope for you.
Oh, that's so funny. I love the Olympics too. Not much of an athlete personally, but I love track and field Olympics, gymnastics. Yes. Next year is an Olympic year. Paris. Yes. Can't wait. The last few Olympics, I should say, we always get Peacock to watch the Olympics, but we don't keep it otherwise. But when you were sending me videos of like that amazing comeback by, was it a U.S. women's
discus thrower? Oh. Yes. I forgot her name, but I sent you the video. She went from 12th to winning gold.
It's amazing.
Yes. There were a lot of comebacks this year.
And I did get to see a video of Sha'Carri Richardson. Sha'Carri Richardson. Said that wrong. Sorry about that.
That's
okay. She won the 100 meters.
She was the anchor on the 4x100 meter relay team, which we love our U.S.
We love relays. A good relay. Mm-hmm.
And she was just a powerhouse. She looks so strong. Like she really has come back, and I'm really excited for her.
Yeah, I love that. I hope that she gets to go and experience a full redemption.
Yes,
in
me
Paris
too.
In 2024.
You have a year. You guys stay healthy, girl.
We are cheering for you. I mean, she had some tragedies, some poor decisions, I think, that cost her the last Olympics, and I was really happy to see her do well.
Yes, me too.
Okay. Well, we love some Olympic sports around here. We just have been geeking out. I told Kimberly, I said, I don't think we could do this if Twyla was here, because I don't think she would share.
She would be snoring over
this
here.
Passion. She would have like totally zoned out on us. But just kind of tie into our lesson, it makes me think about the disciples. They were the B team. They were not all-stars. Nobody was putting them on their Olympic team.
No.
They were the guys who had been passed over by all the other rabbis. But Jesus chose these B team kind of guys to be his disciples. And, right now we're getting into this place where the intensity is picking up, and they are really, they're really sticking it out. They're confused. They're probably bothered, and we'll talk about some of that in the lesson. But it gives me a lot of hope.
Oh yeah,
it gives me so much hope, because I feel like I'm a B team kind of Christian, maybe a C team, but Jesus is. I'm committed to him and he's committed to me. And, we're all a work in progress.
Yes.
Even the all-stars are a work in progress.
Right.
Because they just want to do better. And continue to, make goals and pass their goals.
Yes. So Jesus is for the underdog.
He is for the underdog. And that is good news for me. So I want to move us into this lesson. Friends, in our last episode, we launched into Act 2 in the Gospel of Mark. As Jesus moves closer and closer to the cross, the conversations with his disciples are going to be picking up in intensity. In Act 2, he's going to tell them twice that he is going to be rejected in Jerusalem, and he's going to be put to death. And of course, kind of how we saw in a previous episode, they didn't really understand what he was talking about. This made zero sense to them. And they had to be having a lot of questions going through their minds. They started following Jesus because they hoped he was the Messiah. And, some of them had even heard John the Baptist say, he's the one you've been waiting for. He's the one we've all been waiting for. They signed up for the kingdom of God is near. Remember, that's how Mark kind of starts off, with John the Baptist and then Jesus coming onto the scene and announcing that the kingdom of God has come near. But still, as they followed him, they had to be wondering about what it really means to follow Jesus. So as I was kind of mulling this over in my head, and we just finished reading through the Gospels again, right, Kimberly? Yay, us. And as I'm reading, we finished John today, and so it's like you're taking in a lot of different stages of the disciples through reading the Gospels continuously like this, and then coming back in light of our passage. They had already experienced some hard things. Consider this. At this point, in Mark 8, where we're going to be landing tonight, they had already experienced the death of John the Baptist. John had been put to death by Herod. And you know what? They loved that crazy guy. He was a little eccentric, a little crazy in some of the ways that he did, but he was a mighty man. And I think we would be kidding ourselves if we think John's death didn't raise some questions within them. If I had been one of the disciples, I think these are some of the questions that would have been going through my mind. Why didn't he get his cousin out of prison? How could Jesus let John be put to death? That had to just be crushing to them. I know John's death was a blow to them, but they just kept following Jesus. They didn't understand what was going on. If John's death was a gut check, like I think it probably was, what about when Jesus started talking about his upcoming rejection and death? Like in Mark 8, 31 and 32, these verses kind of precede the text that we're in today. But Jesus made that first announcement to them that he was going to be rejected and put to death. And that caused Peter to rebuke Jesus, which vice versa caused Jesus to rebuke Peter. Jesus said to Peter, You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. This was another gut check moment. Peter's the one who said it, but you know the rest of them were thinking it. When they began following Jesus, they had plans and they had an agenda. And I get it. I understand that. I think we all come to Jesus probably with some ideas. Their plan was they hoped that the Messiah was going to overthrow Rome and establish the Messianic kingdom. Jesus was definitely throwing them a curveball by starting to talk about his death and to say things. So this kind of sets the stage. In the very next set of verses in Mark 8, he gives them something to think about. And Kimberly, I would love for you to read these 4 verses out of Mark 8, starting in 34.
Then he called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels."
Wow, there is so much there to unpack and to think about. To start with, let's look at just those 3 phrases that come out of verse 34. Deny themselves. What does that mean? I think it means that they need to lay down their plans and their agenda. Take up your cross. They were signing up to be, at this point, Jesus is telling them, you have got to be willing to give your life if necessary. When we talk about taking up our cross, what we're saying is we're willing to die for his name, his kingdom, his glory, if that's what it comes to. And if you're not a martyr, then you have to be willing to live your life building his kingdom, which is going to require you to die to self daily. And follow me, you're willing to go anywhere and serve anyone. This is what it means to deny yourself, to take up your cross, and to follow Jesus. And I think when he said this, you could have heard a pin drop. When Jesus said, take up their cross. This is the first time Jesus has mentioned the cross in Mark. And everyone knew what that meant. They had seen crucifixion. It's what Rome did to the rebels and the runaway slaves. Rome liked to crucify beside the road so that everyone who walked past got the message. This is what happens when you defy Rome. They all knew what it meant to take up your cross. It meant that you were condemned to death. The images of a condemned individual carrying the beam of the cross to the site of execution was flashing before their eyes. Because once you've seen crucifixion, you never get over it. You got the message that Rome was sending. And so now Jesus is telling them this is part of what following him looks like. That there's some kind of comparison to taking up their cross. I mean, Jesus was really flipping tables for them. This was introducing a very challenging and difficult thing for them to process. So, Kimberly, I think you and I should just have a little conversation about how we have learned the way of the cross, how that was discipled into us, how we were taught about what it means to follow Jesus, that it's more than just an act of saying a prayer and being baptized, or, you know, it's the growing up in our faith. Like, how did you grow up in your faith, and what did that look like for you in your life?
I think about when I was younger and like everyone in my circle went to church, right? We were all learning the same things and God gave me faith. I believed everything. I believe everything that I read in the Bible. I may not have known the depth of what it all meant, but I believed it. And as I grew older, not everyone went to church, and even older still, it was like there was this falling away and almost a rebellion toward the church. Mm-hmm. And so I would think, and I still think, like, did they just not get it? Like, were they not listening? How could they not believe this? But they must not have, because they're not giving their lives to Christ. And I'm not saying that I'm better than anyone else by any means. I'm just saying I have this hope that is in Jesus and in Jesus alone, and that keeps me going. Mm-hmm. But life is really hard.
No one ever told you that your life was going to be easy following Jesus. That wasn't ever planted in your...
That life would be easy following Jesus? No. Maybe sometimes it seemed like it was implied, or maybe I...
Was blessing, like, did people talk about, like, being, that you would be blessed was any of that?
Yeah.
Because
and,
that creeps in.
Like, all of these things are true.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when your feet are put to the fire and life is hard, sometimes it seems like, I don't know, is this what I signed up for?
Yeah.
Just honest thoughts creeping in.
No, absolutely. I mean, I still think those things.
Yeah. Because it would be a lot easier to just do what everybody else is doing, because it seems like on the surface they're getting instant gratification from other things.
Yeah.
Other than denying themselves and living a life with Jesus. But I know that, like you've said before, life is short and eternity is long. I can barely see what's right in front of me, but I know that there are better things ahead of me. And I hold on to that. I don't know. What do you think, Julie?
I agree with you. I think that I always knew that life was going to be difficult and challenging. I had family members die when I was really young. And so it's like when you first encounter death, like the stakes go up in life. Yeah. And if you watch people walk through, illnesses or things like that, life is going to be not always sunshine and roses and easy. And I knew that God was real. Like, I've never not believed in God. I've not gone through a lot of things that other people have gone through. Again, I don't think it's good for us to really compare ourselves to what other people are going through and things like that, because that's not really, talking about trials and difficulties that are just part of life. That's not what Jesus is talking about here. He's talking about being able to focus on Him. And as I was listening to you kind of talk through, you believed, and you believe that faith was from God. And that's, what I believe too, that God opened your heart and your mind to believe in His Son like He had done with these disciples. But as we look at their lives, it's like our lives. We're like, is this really what it's like to follow Jesus? And so I mean, the questions that I'm asking myself in this season of life, I'm like, is this what walking by faith looks like? Is it just taking like one step at a time and getting through one day at a time? Because I'm like you, I can't think too far out. Because if I start thinking about things way far out, I start getting anxious. And I think that's why Jesus was always like, just worry about today.
Yes,
Focus about today. Just get through today and follow me today. And so that's as simple as I know how to make it. is just one day at a time. Every day I'm trying to make these good decisions of really in my life, it causes me to spend a lot of time by myself.
Yeah.
Because I need a lot of time to study. I need a lot of time to pray and to, so it puts me in a lot of isolation to write and to think about, things that I want to talk about on the podcast and put content together. So I spend a lot of time by myself instead of, having a career or, being able to just go do fun things or do this or that. I don't do those things. And I'm denying a lot of fleshly desires to do things. I have hobbies and interests and things that I would like to do. Someone said to me recently, "We're like, well, you don't even have a job. Like, you wouldn't even know what to do." And I was like, no, I don't have a career in the terms that you're thinking about, but my career is following Jesus. This is what I've given my life to. Like, he called me to ministry. I am dedicated to making disciples. And so I think about when I became a Christian, I was ready to be free of works-based religion, where you had to work, where you were always striving. And so to me, salvation by grace through faith alone was like music to my ears. That sounded amazing. And I knew for certain that I didn't want to go to hell.
Right.
And I was sick and tired of being weighed down with rules and all the accompanying guilt and condemnation from never measuring up or being good enough. And so I had spent a lot of my life like striving for blessing and approval from God. And when I found out that all I had to do was respond in faith that Jesus was the Messiah and take him at his word and just follow him. Well, then all the stuff that had been like something that you had to do to earn God's favor actually has become the things that I get to do for God, that I get to do with God. Like, I love to study the Bible. I love to pray. I love to be in a discipleship community and making disciples and, serving the Lord, going and, whether it's on a mission trip or doing something in a local homeless shelter or something, whatever it is, different things that I've done through the years, that's been my work. But that also means that I've not had a career, been a one-income family. So there's a lot of cost that have come along with following Jesus in ministry. And, and being a woman in ministry, we've talked about before, that's not easy.
No.
I came to Christ later in life. I was 27 when I entered into a relationship with Jesus and made the switch from works to being saved by grace. But then the funny thing is now I had the desire to actually work for God. Like, that was what I wanted to do. The first thing I wanted to do was teach my kids to follow Jesus. And, while I'm teaching them, he was teaching me, and he kept giving me opportunities to serve other women and to do things. So, it's been an amazing journey of following him. It's not been a burden, but there's always been a cost.
I love how you put that. It's true. And I don't want to speak for you, but I'm sure you'd say it's worth it.
Oh, absolutely. and that's just now in this world that it's worth it.
Right.
It's so rewarding and so encouraging. When you think about these disciples, they left their careers. They left, things that they were doing and to follow Jesus and at this stage, they don't really understand what's going on. And he's saying like really, off the wall things, like he's comparing following him to taking up your cross. And that looked like something horrific.
Right. Not desirable.
Not desirable at all. But I love that Jesus tells them all along the way. They see things. And, there's a lot of things that he was doing and saying that we don't know. We don't know how they unpacked John the Baptist dying personally, one-on-one. We don't know what was going on in some of those scenes and things that it was bringing up. Following Jesus is hard, and friends, Jesus knows it's hard. I love in Hebrews 5:8, it says that he learned obedience from what he suffered. And apparently, in the Greek, the verbs learned and suffered, I got this from my study Bible. I thought it was such a cool little tidbit. But those two verbs are a play on something that we would compare to saying no pain, no gain. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
I love the way that my Bible framed that in the notes. Jesus didn't learn because he had moral failure, some kind of sin. Rather, he learned through hard experiences what obedience entails. This means that we have a Savior who is able to sympathize with us when we are in the struggle with denying ourselves. We need a no pain, no gain attitude as we follow Jesus. And that means we have to build spiritual muscles to run our race. It's stuff like that. Kimberly, we were talking about admiring athletes running their race, but athletes have to deny themselves and train. I think Jesus was just setting up his disciples with the knowledge that they were going to have to train. They were in training with him, and they were going to have to learn to run through some pain. I remember a few years ago, I'm not a runner, but I got shin splints. Do you remember that?
Yes.
I got shin splints from walking so much. And
you were walking so fast.
And I was walking way too fast. I should have just been running, but I probably would have gotten shin splints because I wasn't doing it in a good way. But I had to work through that. I had to continue. I couldn't stop walking because now I had shin splints. And so we're going to experience things in our lives that are challenging and hard. And Jesus wants us to be able to follow him even when everything is not going smoothly. And as they follow Jesus, they experience that. I mean, just think about, let's go back to, I mentioned John the Baptist earlier. Jesus had to wrestle within himself to let John die. He felt things deeply. I mean, he had the power and the authority to stop it. He could have done what the disciples might have been asking, things that I was asking. He could have stopped him from dying, but he didn't. Because Jesus, what Philippians 2 tells us about Jesus is that who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness and being found in the appearance of a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. And friends, that's amazing. And how this works out in our lives, it's going to look different for everyone. I relate to the disciples because they had been discipled in religion. That's what had happened to me. I had been discipled in religion and works. That's why I named the podcast Flipping Tables. And I say I follow a table flipper because Jesus was discipling them in a new way. Jesus was flipping the script on them. And that's what he has done in my life. He has taken and been pulling all of that religion that was drilled down into me. And instead, he's given me a love to do the things that religion wanted me to do. But now I do them as an act of service, as a way of denying myself and following Jesus. Think about these disciples. They were with him. And as he was working with them and discipling them, he was teaching them to see him in the law and the prophets that they had memorized, that they knew. The parts about the Messiah being a suffering servant. He was planting seeds with them, but then he was going to let them, they were learning on the go as it was happening to him. Jesus was upfront with them. This is what he did today in this passage. He was upfront with them. In following him, they learned that they might have to leave their jobs. Some of those guys were fishermen who dropped their nets to follow Jesus. Matthew was a tax collector, and he left his booth and started following Jesus. There were zealots who left that lifestyle that was looking for political solutions. These disciples, they left everything but Jesus. And when the crowds said, they don't do it here, but this is the kind of things in the other Gospels where when Jesus says stuff like this is when the crowds said, no, you know what? This is too hard. And they started turning away from Jesus. Jesus would ask them, do you guys want to leave me too? And that's a decision that you have to make. Like Kimberly, when you were talking about your friends, like that you grew up with, you all grew up doing the same things, but at some point they made a different decision and they walked away. And I know people like that too, that we were all in youth group together or something coming up, but they walked away. Following Jesus demands that we are willing to deny our flesh. It means we're going to be battling against our sinful desires of selfishness. What we want, what we need, what we like. This has never been easy for anyone living in any time period. We can't say, oh, it's much harder on us now. This has always been hard. Following Jesus has always been hard. We live in comfort culture where everything is so easy that it makes us, I think, maybe a little extra resistant to anything hard. It's actually made us soft. I mean,
not as resilient.
Not as resilient. I mean, we resist anything that feels like dying. I mean, we quit diets. We quit exercise programs. We quit anything when it gets hard. You know what I was thinking about, like, because we like to cook, Kimberly, I was thinking it takes a lot of effort to cook.
It really does. Yeah.
There is meal planning. There is meal prepping. There is
the shopping,
all the stuff that you have.
The cleanup.
Oh my God, that's the worst part is the cleanup. All of that's hard. It would be so much easier just to order takeout every night. It would be so easy for you guys just to eat cereal, right? Something that takes, that's easy.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't not have takeout or something like that, but I'm just saying, look at all the ways that we
take shortcuts.
We take shortcuts.
Yeah.
Something that I think about is, I think about it every time I start my dishwasher. That dishwasher saves me time, but we're still sitting here talking about cleanup. But we've got things like washing machines and dryers and dishwashers, and we have like little vacuums that run themselves. We have all these things that are kind of make like a domestic life a little bit easier. That's just my world, guys. That's what I think about is like the domestic world. I really need to get out of my house more. But in short, everything we have that makes our lives easier is discipling us to want everything to be easy.
Yeah.
We want instant discipleship. We want to be able to make, a short investment. Like, that's why I think we talked about recently in a previous episode about like reading a devotion, but somebody had to work.
Right.
Somebody had to spend time knowing the Lord and his scriptures and working to produce something that we can boil down a quiet time to
read
5
in
minutes.
5 minutes while you're in the bathroom in the morning.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's what we're looking for. We are so quick to call spiritual disciplines legalism. Have you not heard that? Have you not heard people say that?
And I think
I don't want to be legalistic about studying my Bible. I don't want to be just going through the motion. Friends, sometimes you feel like you're just going through the motions.
Right.
But that is building resilience in you. It is building spiritual discipline in you. You have to deny yourself to spend the time in the Word, learning the Word. As easy and comfortable as life is being made for us, this is not something that we can neglect.
Right. And gloss over and just leave for someone else to do.
Yeah.
I was going to give up on the Bible recap because it was just taking up more time.
And we're reading the Gospels, and you're like, why do I need that too?
Right. But I decided that it was more important for me to listen to it than to listen to something else. You know? Yeah, I might be missing out. Sometimes when people are talking about pop culture, I'm like, oh, what happened? I don't know. You know, I was listening to my Bible. And I'm not saying that to put myself higher than anyone because, I mean, in this culture, that is not very cool. But I found that I've been praying for a hunger and thirst to know God's word because that's how we know God better. And so that's, you know, building my spiritual muscles.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've tried to talk myself out of stopping the Bible recap this year. I'm like, I'll say things to like, this is like the third or fourth time you've done this. Like, you've already, like, you could, I mean, these are the thoughts that are going through my head. Like, you could stop.
Right. And you think, you're not really paying attention to it. You know, are you really getting anything out of it?
Even if it was white noise, it's still better than anything else that I would be listening to.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, when you train for a marathon, a lot of it is just time on your feet because you have to get used to running when you're tired. Because the race is really long. And I think that's why I love the marathon so much because it's just so difficult, you know, and you have to lean into suffering. So it's easy for me to make that comparison to our Christian lives.
Oh, yes.
It's time in the Word because we're going to get tired. And when we get tired, what are we going to do? We're either going to give up or we're going to lean into that training that we've had.
Yeah.
And there you go.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's why I love sports so much. Because I see an example of a person who has made a lot of sacrifices.
Yes.
And this may step on a few toes if you have little children. But friends, a lot of you are spending a lot of your child's developing years maybe investing too much time in the wrong thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Kimberly joked about her kids making the Olympics, but they're probably not going to make the Olympics.
I know.
That doesn't mean that they should, not run and do these things because and there's so much value in sports. So I don't mean to like...
No, I'm not offended at all.
Because we're building like a whole case here that just comparing how the training of an athlete, I mean, you're actually building discipline in those boys by having them run cross country and things like they're doing. I know Elliot just had his, first middle school cross country. And I loved seeing you guys, hearing you guys scream for him and cheer for him. That's amazing. So there's so much value to these things, but I think we should all be taking gut checks and just making sure that, if your kids are athletes, then just make the comparisons, disciple them, talk to them about how, tie it back to what following Jesus is like.
Yeah.
And how that's going to serve them.
Yeah. And it's like in our lives or us personally, how we try to spend as much, or if not more, time in the Word as we are doing other things.
I think the point that we're trying to make is be careful with just saying a prayer and getting baptized so that you can skip hell. I mean, again, everything we have that makes our lives easier is discipling us to want everything to be easy. But when you listen to what Jesus is saying, for whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit your soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? There is no loophole. Jesus is crystal clear. People who go through a motion of saying a prayer and getting baptized so that they can skip hell are going to get a rude awakening. They should have read the book. It's not just in the fine print. Jesus makes it crystal clear. The ones who really want Jesus, not just a get out of hell pass, they stick around. They will be willing to give anything and everything because they value him more than anything that they temporarily lose. That's what we see the disciples doing. This is hard. This is confusing. They don't understand a lot of what he's saying to them, but they're still sticking around. I feel the weight of being upfront with people about salvation. I'm not trying to put a stumbling block in their path. I just care so deeply that they aren't deceived by a fire insurance gospel. For example, a few weeks ago, Paul was telling me about one of the children at our church getting baptized. You were probably there, Kimberly. Mm-hmm. And he was coming home and had come home from church, and he was telling me about this. And I was actually having a pretty hard day that day. And I think the weight of following the table flipper was especially heavy on me that particular day. So I kind of jumped over the praise when he was telling me, like, I should have been like, praise the Lord, that's awesome. And I began to say something like, oh my goodness, I really hope and pray that someone is teaching these children what comes after salvation. Like, I was just like, I really hope that their parents and their Sunday school teachers and youth leaders and people are discipling them about the way of the cross. And Paul's just like, okay, all right, they'll get it. You know, it takes time. None of us really know what it's going to cost when we first, begin to follow Jesus. We don't know what it's going to cost us to carry our cross. And I understand that. I understand that we want our children to be saved. I did. I prayed from the time that I became a mom. I was praying over those babies and toddlers. I had this earnest prayer that they would be saved young. I never wanted them to have a season where they didn't know Jesus. And God was faithful. He answered my prayer. I believe that we should scream the good news about Jesus to a lost world. Starting with those closest to us and telling others every opportunity we get. It's what Jesus did, and it's what his disciples did. And all of them except John died a martyr's death. They had a hard time with it as it was unfolding in their present lives with Jesus. We can relate to them. They took the hard words that he spoke and they weighed them against what they saw him do. And they kept believing and holding on until their faith became sight. Yes, they knew what carrying a cross looked like. They had seen it. But what they hadn't seen was someone who was willing to carry a cross for them. That's beautiful and amazing. It is lavish love. Jesus, as he discipled them, he was progressively rolling out his new kingdom right before their eyes. They had a front row seat to see this. They saw Jesus deny himself and take up his cross. Whatever he said, he did. And over time, it all clicked. So we don't have to be pessimistic about seeing children come to Christ. Maybe that's only me. Like, it's because I care so deeply that I just want to make sure that someone's going to help them when it gets hard. Mm-hmm. We want to be people who help other people, and we want to model what it looks like to deny ourselves and to take up our cross and to follow Jesus. It clicked with the disciples. It clicks with us along the way. The Holy Spirit certainly helps. Mm-hmm. The kingdom that they had signed up for looked different than they were expecting. And I think following Jesus usually looks different than we expected. It's a walk by faith. This is an upside down kingdom. And our way of grasping the upside down kingdom comes through following the table flipper. He will turn your life upside down. And at times, everything may feel like it's falling to pieces. And you know what? It might be. I've been there. But I got this picture of a puzzle box. And I imagined that puzzle box being thrown into the air, like all those puzzle pieces just being tossed in the air. And they're falling to the ground. And instead of them being a bunch of scattered pieces and pieces that are missing, when they hit the ground, they fall into one beautiful scene. Not a piece missing. It's complete and perfect. God knows what he's doing. That's what our lives are like. All those puzzle pieces are flying around in our lives right now, and we don't know how it's all going to turn out, but we do the one thing that we know to do. We deny ourselves, take up our cross, and keep following Jesus because God knows what he's doing. God is able to make what might seem like a shattered life fall into place. That's kind of what it's like following Jesus. And you know, sometimes I feel the weight of this all too heavily. And I know recently I said to the Lord, I am so sorry for despising carrying my cross, denying myself. But you are worthy of it all. And as I said that little confession, I think I was standing in my kitchen when I said it, this phrase, scorning its shame, ran through my mind. And I know where that verse is. And so it just felt like Jesus was saying, you know, I went to the cross, but I scorned the shame of the cross. And why did he do that? I want to close us with these verses from Hebrews 12:2. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Jesus understands. He understands that what he's asking you to do is hard. He felt contempt. That's what it means when it says scorning its shame. He felt contempt over the shame and the suffering. But Jesus, he actually goes even beyond that because he actually became an object of scorn. When the cross was before him, he was on his face in the Garden of Gethsemane, praying and sweating blood. Because remember, Roman crucifixion didn't just kill, it killed in the most humiliating way. It was agonizing. And Jesus knew what he was doing all along. He knew where he was headed, and he did it for the joy on the other side of it. So whatever we're walking through as we follow Jesus daily, there is joy on the other side of it. I think these verses out of Hebrews, they pull me back and lift my spirit. And I really need them on those days when I am feeling like this is too heavy, this is too much. But I remember these verses, and they do what they say. They cause me to be a little less weary, and they cause me not to lose heart.
Thank you, Julie. Well, let's end with our bright spots.
I know it was getting kind of heavy there at the end.
Yes. Let's lighten it up a little bit. Well, mine is on theme. I was watching the gymnastics, U.S. Gymnastics Championships, and I just loved watching Simone Biles.
Oh, I'm so jealous. I would have loved to have seen that.
You know, she took time off to take care of herself, and it was just a joy to see her come back, and she looked so strong and so happy, and it was just a bright spot for me.
You know what? I'm actually going to make it my bright spot too, because I saw the video of her doing this perfect vault. It was amazing. And I looked at that, and I watched it over and over, and it just brought me such joy seeing her, because we all remember what it was like for her a few years ago. Just the little parts, that little picture of her life that we saw just kind of unravel. But to see her land that vault so perfectly, and to just think, I was so impressed that she was in such good shape, and she's gotten married and all these things. So she's going to be my bright spot too.
I love it.
So friends, we hope that you have been encouraged. We hope that our conversation has spurred you on. Just keep following the table flipper and leave the table flipping to Jesus.